because in looking at our city's expenditures, the obligations, the liabilities, it was very clear to me that we were insolvent. The only folks that don't understand that are the folks inside of City Hall. But it was very clear to me that we were insolvent. We need to make major changes. And so I said, walk me through the bankruptcy process because I'm not sure we can get around these liabilities. We walked through and they convinced me over a series of weeks that bankruptcy is not actually a good vehicle for us. And in particular, I looked at the city of Vallejo that filed for bankruptcy about 18 months ago. And in that bankruptcy process, the judge said, pension benefits are protected by the California State Constitution. As such, the court has no ability to rescind, alter, modify, reduce those pensions. And it moved right on to the next topic. And so I said, all right, if I'm not able to fix the pensions in bankruptcy, and that's what's really driving our financial problems, then I need to figure out how we get another alternative, another vehicle. One of the things that I was impressed by in bankruptcy, though, was the idea that in going through bankruptcy, you have to put all your financial laundry on the table. Your income, your expenditures, your liabilities, your assets. The judge won't let you exclude anything. In fact, you have to ask all your vendors, do I owe you any money? And if they are owed money, they have to talk to the court. And the court basically says, anyone who doesn't tell us that you're owed money by this date, we don't care. It's done, it's over, it's gone. And they look at the entire balance sheet. Second thing I like about bankruptcy is that you have to show the judge a reorganization plan, detailed. And in fact, the judge requires you to do your own legal research. If there's disputes, he says, no, you're writing the brief, I'm reviewing the brief, making modifications, but you're doing the case law review. You're looking at the claims. You're making the legal arguments. And so I like the idea that we had to go out and examine each of the claims from the standpoint of, is it legally correct? Are there legal avenues for reforming it? The judge also says, I'm not going to take your word for it in terms of the financial savings. I want to see independent verification, third-party verification. And the judge ultimately asks for a reorganization plan where it's not a campaign slogan, it's not a press release, it's line by line, detail by detail, exactly what the company will do to restructure its finances. That plan is then put before the judge, and the judge looks at it. That's the final thing I like about the bankruptcy process. The judge will look at that plan and ask the question, if this plan is implemented, can this company be profitable once it emerges from bankruptcy? The profit test. It's a very important element of bankruptcy. Because if you are not going to be able to show the judge that after you do all these reforms, all this reorganization, that your company can be profitable, the judge says you are in the wrong chapter. You do not need to reorganize because no reorganization will work for you. You need to liquidate. And we need to settle up with your creditors for pennies on the dollar. So I took the disciplines of bankruptcy and went to a project team in May. And I said, I want you to pull together a recovery plan as though we were going into a bankruptcy court and handing it in. I want you to document all the legal citations. I want you to get third-party scores. I want you to show me how we pass a profit test. And instead of the profit test being financial, our profit for our city government is, can our city government emerge and provide an assurance to our neighborhoods that the basic services will be maintained and provided. I call them the 3 R's: roads, response times, and recreation. The basics of city government have to be secured. So we went through, and I was surprised at the number of items that came up and ideas that were generated. Some of our best ideas actually came from within city departments. A lot of ideas from members of the public. And then my team over 5-6 months reviewed, validated, and examined. What we're able to show you is a couple conclusions from this process. First, we looked at Revenue increases, we looked at service cuts. And the conclusion I can present tonight, and it's a mathematical, it's not a philosophical conclusion, it is a mathematical conclusion, that no service cut is deep enough and no tax or fee increase is big enough to solve the problem, unless you deal with pension and retiree health care liabilities. You must reform your liabilities. When we look at in a moment at the pension payments going up each year, you'll see just how dramatic the cost increase is. There's no way to service the debt. What we were able to do is balance next year's budget without cuts to police and fire, without any service cuts, for example. We were able to produce $93.3 million in cost savings, documented in next year's budget. We were also able to show how that profitability test is achieved, like bankruptcy, because we didn't just do a one-year budget plan, we did a 5-year budget plan. I've seen too many government budgets balance on day one, and then they fall apart. Why? Because they're using accounting gimmicks. You got stuff slid under the rug. We decided to push something off to next year's fiscal year. I wanted to say, no, 5 years. Show me every single year. 5 years. And then where are we in year 5 as we emerge from reorganization? So 93.3 million, the reason why that says 87.3 right now is redevelopment. I laid out under one of the chapters, chapter 7, that redevelopment agencies need to start paying back. We need to start seeing public interest protected, not special interest. And I said, we're going to start with a lowball figure. $3 million is what you, CCDC, are going to pay back. Well, a week after this was released, a major proposal that I made 3 years ago to transfer debt service from the general fund for the convention center to CCDC was validated by our city attorney. And it doesn't just generate $3 million in savings, it generates $9.2 million in savings this year alone. And so we upped it to $93.3 million in savings. That's in year 1. Over the 5 years, it saves over $1 billion. $737 million comes from pension and retiree health care reform. $304 million comes from rethinking how we're providing services. Really challenging departments. How do we flatten the hierarchy, reduce the span of control, embrace managed competition? How do we look at alternative service delivery models that may be more efficient, public-private partnerships? And, of course, looking at our actual costs of providing services by looking at every nook and cranny of the labor contracts. You'd be very surprised by some of the things we found in the labor contracts. We talked about bankruptcy. I want to show with you the 5-year plan. If you go to the next one. The current projected deficits, $72 million for each of the 5 years. What we're able to do is, like in a bankruptcy proceeding, we commit to a spending limit in terms of what we're willing to spend each year. We restore browned out fire stations immediately. We also provide a gain share, a profit share, performance-based incentive fund for our employees. I know some people are like, nah, don't do that. Take the money and let's save it. I have never seen a turnaround in any organization, public, private, or nonprofit, that does not have the participation in a gain share for employees. We have to make our rank and file employees part of the solution. They need to see the benefit in fiscal reform and fiscal solvency. They need to be rewarded for achieving good performance. It's not the fault of the rank and file city employee. The fault lies with the politicians who allowed this to happen and the labor union leaders who demanded the concessions. Year after year after year. You want to point fingers? Those are the two groups when it comes to labor costs. You want to point fingers in addition to that as to why we're in the ditch? Go look at big business and some of the boondoggles that they were able to push forward. Both big business and big labor both have their fingerprints all over San Diego's fiscal crisis. But it's not our employees. Our employees, we have to create an environment where our employees actually want to come to work and feel good about working. So I will defend this proposal as something that will help our taxpayers get the quality services that we need. We also need to look at infrastructure. It's one of our other major liabilities outside the pension that we are going to be crippled by. We can physically see our infrastructure debt. It's the potholes, it's the sinkholes, it's the sidewalks that are crumbling because we've not properly maintained and repaired our community infrastructure. So what we do, if you can back up one slide, is on those surpluses that I project, we go ahead and lock in a formula for how we will spend it. My fear is that the city council, when they see that first year surplus, will go back to fun and fancy-free spending. We can never allow that to happen. A recovery plan, the secret of the sauce, is holding it. It's sustainability. It's keeping with the program. It's like a diet or an exercise program. You can't do it for a day. It's over a period of time when you see the best results. And so what we do is we project surpluses. I don't want to go to zero. I'd rather have a problem of how do we distribute a surplus than, oh golly, mid-year, how do we take care of the deficit? That's a pattern of behavior here in San Diego. We need to break. So we require that during the 5 years, any time a surplus is produced, that 25% is given to the council as fund money to restore services like library hours, police and fire, etc. 25% has to go to infrastructure automatically, and 50% goes to debt reduction. We have to put pension reforms up to a public vote because you cannot trust the city council to reform pensions on their own. You also can't trust them not to give away goodies on pension in year 3, year 4, year 5, and undo all the great progress. So pension reform is proposed for a public vote. And finally, we presume a very modest 2.5% increase in revenues each year. Modest. What if we have an economic recovery like we're all hoping for? Don't let them spend it. So any revenue growth for the 5 years over 2.5%, automatically 100% of that revenue goes into an infrastructure lockbox so that we can build up the percentage of our budget going to deferred maintenance, neighborhood infrastructure projects. I wish I could do more on infrastructure. I believe we will be able to do more on infrastructure. However, our top challenge right now is coming in with pension reform and bringing service costs down to a sustainable level. We have to take this in bite-sized chunks.